So, yeah, not sowing too many of the seeds in one go. Just to think about how much space we've got further on, and that's partly about the final position, how much bed space have you got to finally plant out into. Have you got mates you can give away plants to, that kind of thing. But also, if we think about it, if we're raising early in the year in February, and we're using a bit of extra heat in a greenhouse, how much space have we got in that greenhouse? So protected space and heated space is even more valuable than just the kind of like general laying out space. So let's think about that. And yeah, not a lot of complication involved. I'm sowing these, I'm putting mix in to within about 1 centimetre at the top to begin with. And then it depends how large my seeds are, how much mixture I'm going to put on top of that. So just for sowing fine seeds, what have I got here? Parsley, quite hard to germinate. These are guaranteed this year's seeds, so they're definitely going to germinate, one of the umbellifers. And I'm going to sow about half or a third of a packet full. There's about 50 seeds in a packet. I'm sowing about 15 or 20 into that size pot. And then I'm going to cover it with a little bit of mixture and just settle that down so that when that's watered, the seeds won't come to the surface. And especially when we get larger seeds like peas and beans, when they're dry and you sow them, they can float to the surface when you water. So you want to check that they don't come up. Same with the small seeds. And the general rule of guiding principle there is, if you think how big your seeds are, so parsley about 2 millimetres long, and I've also got some peas here, and they're about 5 millimetres across, maybe a bit more. The rule is that you cover up your seeds with twice as thick mix as the longest part of the seed. And some seeds are long and thin, but you'd still sow them twice as deep as the length of them. So that's the general idea. So with those peas, beans, I can put at least 1 centimetre on top. In the case of broad beans, more like 2 inches. Cabbages, they'll actually germinate easily through 1 centimetre, so they can be planted quite deep. So those are parsleys, they've been sown. Imagine them being watered, and I've got a dozen good seedlings come up. Then I'm going to want to pot them on, and I'll probably pot each one into this size pot after a month using the potting on mixture without the concentrates. So that could be illustrated by, imagine these are parsleys, they're actually poached eggplant, and they've been growing for a couple of months in these seed trays. And let's just have a look. So we've got roots everywhere. These are fibrous rooting, so they've got a lot of root, and as I get them out, I'm splitting them apart at the root, making sure that I don't damage especially the growing shoot and where that's connected to the root system below. But if it was parsley seedlings, they'd have a smaller root system, I'd have to be a bit more gentle. So I'm just observing its surface. There's actually 2 or 3 there, and then there's a gap before the rest. If I split from the top down, so start at soil level and going down vertically through the mixture, and that means the different root systems, where they're growing into each other, are then pulled apart without breaking the root. So the idea here is to retain as big a root system as possible, and also what's happened here is all the soil is clinging onto those roots. Some seedlings, smaller seedlings, you might just get the bare root without any soil attached. If you can retain the root system with soil around each bit of the root, then this root system stays in the same 3-dimensional pattern as it was growing in its first position. And then to pot on, let's just get the potting on mix. I'll show you more of this in a minute. But yeah, retaining that in 3 dimensions, I want to get the roots in the middle of the pot as much as possible. And I want to actually put more on the surface, so So I'm overfilling the pot, and I'm pressing down quite hard in the corners, and I want a firm bond between the existing root system now in the middle of the pot and the soil all around it. I don't want the new mixed medium just floating around it. I want it to really grip. It won't be difficult for the roots to grow out because there's all the lovely fluffy bits of perlite vermiculite in there. But the crucial thing about if I firm in well, then if we have an accident, it's perfectly okay. It's still something like, dropped it again. No, it's fine still. And that's, again, through working with groups, working with lots of people, you do have accidents, and it's another reason for firming in. But if we scale that little demonstration up, we've got the three-dimensional pattern of the roots separated by soil and then centred in the new pot so it can stay in there for as long as possible and also survive if we don't water it for a couple of weeks. So I've got soil all the way around the existing root system, and then I'm pressing down and topping up and pressing that down, and then I've got a well-established plant, and for these that's going to be fine. Yeah, if we're handling smaller seedlings, smaller than this poached egg, if you can handle the roots without damaging, that's fine. And some seedlings you might hold the true leaves or the seed leaves, but make sure, crucially, that you don't damage the stem. Between the root below ground and the shoot above ground, some things like cabbages have a long bit of stem there, and if you bend it, it'll snap. And it looks okay, you can set it up right in the pot, but if you snap the stem, your plant is dead, and you throw it away. And yeah, this is part of learning from nature again, in terms of nature produces millions of young, hoping that just a few will survive. There's so many cases where billions of eggs are produced, and you only get a few dozen that finally make it to maturity. So we've got to have a bit of that same aspect. So if I'm looking at a bunch of seedlings, I'll pick out the stronger ones, and I'll reject the runty ones. Here's one, it's not really growing very well at the edge of the pot, at the edge of the tray. If I've not